What's good, everybody? And this Coach Muhammad back here with Hoop Symmetry for another video. It's been a little while. Life updates, moving, other things like that. But more importantly today, I have a video talking about a very important topic. So now, we've seen Steve Kerr in a lot of controversy in the past few days, mainly surrounding his role with Jonathan Kuminga, his part in the Jonathan Kuminga debacle. And I made a video about this in the past, but what really sparked me talking about it today was this video I saw with DeMarcus Cousins, Lou Williams, and Chandler Parsons on their new podcast. And I wanted to kind of get into it and do a little bit more of a deep dive into Coach Steve Kerr and a little bit more of his history. So let's check out the clip first.
Everything about this situation is just wrong, it's bad, and it's unprofessional. I do want to start off by saying I commend the young fella Kuminga for the way he's handled this situation. You've done it professionally, you've done it with grace, and you've done it in a respectful way. So with all that being said, I commend you for that. This situation with Steve is just continuing to get more weird by the day. It's almost like it's a personal issue at this point, because like Chandler just said, Jimmy is now, out for the season, and even with that, he still found a way to make Kuminga be the last person to come off the bench. It literally makes no sense, and I think we should start paying attention to the history, because for some reason, when it comes to the players, it's always easy to bring up their history. Anything negative in their history is the first thing brought up. So let's bring it up, as far as pertaining to Steve Kerr. We've watched him with Team USA find a way to not find minutes for Jason Tatum. We're talking about Jason Tatum.
Yeah, sure.
We swept that under the rug. Draft process with Anthony Edwards. He overlooked the talent. He had every, excuse in the book as to why he felt Anthony Edwards wasn't. Same thing with LaMelo. Now we're looking at this Kuminga. It's situation after situation after situation where he's continuing to downplay young talent, and we're now fast forwarding to this situation. And once again, we're overlooking it and kind of sweeping it under the rug. Like, something has to be said, something has to be done as far as why do these type situations continue to happen under the watch of Steve Kerr when it comes to young talent. So I just don't like that part of this.
So what I really want to do is, when you heard what Boogie was saying, he kind of got into it, but I wanted to get a little bit more into it about Steve Kerr's time as a coach. And I want to take this all the way back to around 2010, 2011, back when Mark Jackson was the head coach. So if you guys don't know, back in around 2010, Golden State Warriors were still a league pass team, a very fun team. People played with them on 2K. The roster wasn't very good. They did have guys like Rodney Carney, Steph Curry, Monta Ellis. Jeremy Lin was on that team, not really receiving minutes, but David Lee. Who remembers AC Law and Al Thornton? Darrell Wright used to be my guy on 2K, corner threes, and Brandon Wright was, one of those big tweeners before tweeners were cool. They had a lot of different guys. They were a fun team, but they were not very good at all. They're only fun for people on 2K. Now, because Golden State had prospects of being a good team, eventually they finally hired Mark Jackson in June 6, 2011. And once they hired Mark Jackson, you instantly saw a culture change. Mark Jackson was the media guy for a long time, but he always has this like serious deacon type of way about him, and he immediately transformed them into a more serious team. And one of the biggest calling cards he had, one of the main reasons why he was targeted as a hire in the first place, was because of his defensive philosophy. He used to be a defensive player back when he played, and he clearly had a keen eye for defense. And that is what he immediately began doing, working on transforming the Golden State Warriors' defensive identity. Now, it got off to a little bit of a slow start, because in the first year after he was hired, that's the year Stephen Curry also got injured again. He only played 26 games that year. They were not very good. They finished 23-43 that year. I believe that might have been the lockout year. That's why it's such a short season. But at that time, though, it was more so just building up different players, again, establishing a defensive identity, letting guys like Richard Jefferson and them play, and that's what the Warriors were. However, what Mark Jackson started to establish, early on would clearly start bearing fruit the next year, because that very next season, after 2011, when Stephen Curry finally comes back, the team starts making some different decisions, some different moves, and start becoming what we know them as today. And so one of the biggest jumps they had, as you can see, is the Golden State Warriors defense significantly improved from the 2010-11, from the 26th rated defense, about 110, to around the 15th, 18th. So again, improvement. This is how coaching works. You come in, you implement your sauce on the system, team starts to improve as they start to embrace it. So the defense continuously gets better. So much so that in the very next year, after that year that they started establishing a defensive identity, got to a middle of the pack defense, became an okay team. The very next year, they went to third in the league in defense. Now, also very key during that next season, that 2012 season, what was very key is the Monte Ellis trade. They had Klay Thompson, so they started establishing clarity. Again, Draymond Green started to play a little bit. But now, the real thing was Stephen Curry has now become a 20-something point scorer in the league. I think he finished 11th in MVP voting that year. But his assist numbers went up. Stephen Curry came in the league as a combo guard out of Davidson. Mark Jackson kind of was the first iteration of really establishing him as a traditional top of the key point guard. These are the most assists he's ever averaged at this point in his career. He was right around 7 assists this season. He's 23-7. After being a backup the year before to Monte Ellis, Klay Thompson also jumps on the scene, now jumping up from a 12-point per game scorer to now a 16.5-point per game scorer, and the Splash Brothers are established. The benefit of them losing that year before with Steph Curry getting injured was they were able to get guys like Harrison Barnes and draft Draymond Green and things of that nature. They also were able to move on from Monte Ellis to put Klay Thompson into the starting lineup, which immediately you saw the instant chemistry. I remember Klay Thompson during those summer leagues was a legend. Like, he could not miss. Like, it was insane. So the move was clear. He also was bigger, offered defense, and people had a lot of questions about that small backcourt between Steph and Monte. It didn't really make sense, even though both were really good players. They chose to go with Curry, put Thompson in the lineup, and boom, off they went. Also, by doing this, by making themselves a competitive team, they finally made their first playoff debut since the We Believe Warriors. So now that they've put Klay Thompson in the starting lineup, they're starting to play Mark Jackson's style. They have a better defense. They are now finally in the postseason. In that postseason, they run into Denver. So they're a 6 seed. They're playing Denver, who's a number 3 seed at that time, with Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, Iguodala at the time. And so clearly the Nuggets were supposed to beat the Warriors. The Warriors had just been a joke a couple of years ago. And the Warriors end up actually upsetting the Nuggets. So under Mark Jackson, we were just a joke when I was hired. One season in, Stephen Curry's injured the whole year. It's kind of like this year when Curry broke his hand under Kerr. You knew you weren't going to win. You get Kuminga and all these people. You know, you kind of punt on that year. You come back, you retool, put Klay Thompson in the starting lineup. You get Harrison Barnes. And now this very first year, we're going to the playoffs, and not only are we making it to the playoffs, we're upsetting the number 3 overall seed in the Denver Nuggets. This is Mark Jackson, second year as a coach. This was the Warriors' kind of first time everyone was like, they can be for real. And at this time, Charles Barkley is still saying, you know, a jump shooting team will never win the championship team. This is around the time Miami Heat and the Heatles are winning a championships. What this did as well is it gave the Warriors legitimacy and confidence. So when they come into this next year, they start to kill it. They actually become one of the best teams in the NBA, now going from a decent defense to the 3rd overall ranked defense in the NBA. They've ratcheted up. And now they have playoff experience. So now they're also ready to go into the postseason and actually make some noise this year. Stephen Curry takes another jump. Stephen Curry goes from 22 and around 7 to around 24 points and almost 9 assists. So this is what I'm saying. Stephen Curry benefited from being turned into more of a traditional point guard. Stephen Curry was always a little bit of a combo guard. But now he actually started receiving the reps. If you watch Stephen Curry's game, you know he's a little loose with the handle sometimes. That was a big thing for him when guys would be really aggressive and physical in there. But when you have to constantly rep out high ball screens at the top of the key with physical defenders as you're the play initiator, this is what honed that part of the game for Stephen Curry. And now he went from 11th in MVP honors to 6th. So again, teams going up. Again, now they just went from the being a losing team to 51-31, second in the Pacific Division, and here they go. This was also the time. This was also around the time where Mark Jackson instantly came out with his famous quote, And this was on January 21st, 2014 is when the Warriors dropped this video. And it is infamously when Mark Jackson comes out and calls Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson the greatest shooting backcourt the NBA has ever seen.
In April, you said you thought your two guys were potentially the best shooting backcourt of all time. Is that still how you feel?
I didn't say that. I said they are the greatest shooting backcourt that's ever played this game. I don't think it's a debate. They are two incredible shooters. Take out potential and call my bluff.
And this was not like a standard take at this time. You got to remember, people were considering Steph and Klay like exciting young players. They were not considering them the greatest of all time at anything. And so when Mark Jackson came out and said this, initially it was controversial, but we see how it's playing out today. Now this year, the Warriors are booming. They're ready to take on the playoffs. They make it to the postseason and they run into the Lob City Clippers. So they play the Lob City Clippers and they take them to 7 games, but unfortunately they fall short, but that's okay. This is a young and up and coming team versus a team with established stars. Chris Paul used to be like an older brother to Stephen Curry, Wake Forest, that North Carolina connection. I know some people who follow the Warriors closely remember Stephen Curry saying this isn't 2014 anymore to Chris Paul. This is what they're talking about, because this is the time when the young team ran up against the veteran team and they lost. And then they never lost to them after that, but we'll get more into this. Again, you were bad. Curry was hurt. You upset the Nuggets. You now go 7 games against the Clippers. After upsetting Nuggets, by the way, that other year, they took the Spurs to 6 games, who ended up playing the Miami Heat. So they gave them legitimacy. They come into the playoffs, they play the Clippers to a standstill, and unfortunately, they're not able to get over the hump. That's fine. You just come back next year. It's kind of like reminds me of when the Thunder hit the wall and couldn't get there. And the next year they come back and they win it. That's how it works, you know. But what happens? What is Mark Jackson rewarded with after this constant early trajectory, building something that had never had any type of legitimacy before to a legitimate team? Fired is what he gets. Fired. So Mark Jackson is fired. They report that this has to do with his disagreement with management or something along those lines. That is what the reports say. However, you know, a lot of people didn't like this. Some people said that Mark Jackson and his offense was stagnant, even though I think that's a hard claim to substantiate, given that he only had a couple of seasons, both improving each year. But, you know, hey, it's a cold business. Anyway, now Mark Jackson is fired, and what happens? In comes our boy of today's video, Steve Kerr. So Stephen Kerr comes in for the Golden State coaching job, and he instantly implements this Princeton-style, post-split style offense, where it's pace and space, emphasizing swinging the ball, rotating the floor, moving it to the next side, making the extra pass, finding Steph, off-ball screening, all of this movement action. And it is an amazing thing. That's why I compare Steve Kerr to Mike D'Antoni. Steve Kerr is the Mike D'Antoni of basketball coaching that just happens when everything goes your way. That's Steve Kerr. So anyway, again, this takes the league by storm. Stephen Curry is unlocked again because in Davidson in his whole career, he was always a very good off-ball mover. And so now he's been honing in on his on-ball point guard skills with Mark Jackson. Steve Kerr brings in a style which emphasizes his off-ball skills as well. So now this creates this monster that we now know wins the MVP. Takes the NBA by storm. They go on to win the championship. So again, their defense goes from the 3rd best to the 1st. They pretty much keep the habits. That's pretty much Steve Kerr says all the time. He gives Mark Jackson a lot of credit. He basically says we kept the defensive habits and I just added this like offensive thing. And then even in that road to the championship though, there was a couple of key things that I saw Steve Kerr get a lot of credit for that I'm not sure if he should have gotten credit for. So again, we're not taking away what Steve Kerr came and implemented as the offensive system. He was the offensive architect behind this Princeton-style offense in the modern NBA that a lot of people started copying, you know. So he brought that in, which is amazing. Just like Mike D'Antoni was the architect of this 7 seconds or less, pace and space, high ball screen, heliocentric offense type of system to the NBA. That again was very effective. The only difference is he was never able to get over the hump because they say he didn't emphasize defense. Well, the benefit for Steve Kerr is I didn't have to. The guy before me already did it for me. So now all I got to do is bring in the offense, and my player just has to rise to the occasion and moments, and we good. So that's the story of Steve Kerr. But anyway, one of the moves that people were giving him credit for was that Grizzlies series. In the Grizzlies series, if you guys don't remember, they were actually beating the Warriors 2-1. One of the main things that the Warriors did that was considered this unique idea was they put Bogut, the center, on Tony Allen, the guard, which nowadays is a very common type of defensive strategy that people employ. But at the time, it wasn't too common at all.
I think it made sense. Look, I mean, it's unorthodox, but I think I'm one of the best help defenders on the team, and I understand spacing enough that I thought it's actually not a bad idea. Harris's job was not to get hit by Zebo, just try to stay in front the whole time, and then I just roamed around in the paint. If Tony Allen beats us making 5 threes, I think we'll shake their hand and congratulate him and take that loss.
Personally, how much fun was
I remember I was watching the podcast and Steve Kerr actually said that Kenny Atkinson, I think he was working for the Hawks at the time, and one of his assistant coaches had kind of convinced him to do this because he didn't believe that it was going to be successful, but it was the most successful. It was the thing that flipped the series because once Bogut was put on Tony Allen and offensively Tony Allen was neutralized and basically neutralized the entire offensive set for the Grizzlies, his value on defense wasn't able to be used because he couldn't be on the floor. Because if you make it hard for me to score, but you literally cannot score, then yeah, I'm up in that exchange. So Tony Allen was played off the floor. They had to start playing more Courtney Lee, other people. And once that happened, Stephen Curry was able to unlock. That's what happened in that Grizzlies series. And I don't even think that was Steve Kerr for real. He didn't really say it. And I couldn't find the clip on YouTube, but I'm pretty sure it was on the Draymond Green podcast. And there was another podcast he was on, but I couldn't find him anymore. But I remember watching him. That's why I recant that. So I believe it was Kenny Atkinson. It was either Kenny Atkinson or the assistant coach. Steve Kerr always talks about him and Kenny's relationship and kind of talks about this idea. So I'll play that clip where he described their relationship and how Kenny always comes to him with certain visionary ideas.
Continuity was already there, the talent, and obviously they were pretty damn good last year. I think all of these jobs are different, and this was a great job to get, just like mine was 10 years ago. Coming into a team that was already talented, already a playoff team, and then now you're just tweaking things and seeing where you can get better on the margins rather than trying to grow something organically. That's more difficult to do. So it's a perfect spot, and Kenny has taken advantage, and the team is doing great, and it looks like a good fit.
By the time he left you guys, just what do you see as his greatest strength as a coach?
He's just an all-around coach. He's not an offensive guy. He's not a defensive guy. He's not a player development guy. He's kind of all of the above. He's a tireless worker. He loves it. Every time I call him, he'd be watching League Pass. And he's a maniac in a good way. And he did a phenomenal job for us and helped us win a championship and made me a better coach and covered up for my weaknesses. And so it was really a perfect marriage, and I'm thrilled for him that he was able to get this job. All of us as NBA coaches are reliant on the talent and the character of our players. No matter what we do scheme-wise, no matter what we do culture-wise, we better have players and high-character guys. And Kenny has just done a great job of picking up where they left off. Everything that JB did the last couple of years, helping to build this team. Clearly, it's been a team on the rise, and Kenny has just added his touch, what he felt like he could do to help the team get better, and he's obviously done a great job.
Steph and Draymond have been able to play at a high level for a number of years. They tore it all the way down and built it all the way back up. Are you surprised at all at how quickly they've been able to?
Pretty hard thing to do, to tear it down, and you have to get a little lucky.
And this would be on brand for a guy like Kenny Atkinson, as he's always been described as a visionary. I watched the 520 podcast a lot with Jeff Teague and those guys, and they talk about how he's always been the guy with an eye for talent.
Kenny Atkinson.
He turned into some
coach for the Cavs.
He
told
looked
me
crazy overseas.
Kenny Atkinson, coach of the Cavs, told me he's gonna be the best player in the NBA. Him and Steph Curry. He literally told me that. And when he was he said, I watched this kid dribble and throw a behind the back pass. I knew he's gonna be the best player in the league. He was like, we gotta trade up and get him. That's why Kenny made me a believer, because he said that, and I always believe what Kenny said, because he told me what Steph Curry was gonna be. And I was like, hell no. And then when Steph Curry started killing, well, all right, man, you the GOAT. Whatever you say, I'm start believing, because you just told me Steph Curry was gonna be the best. He's like, his footwork is just better than everybody's. He has better feet. He's like, he's gonna be the best. He told me Kyrie was gonna be good, but then when he seen Giannis, he said, "I'm telling you, Jeff, he gonna change the NBA." He said
definitely did.
he's fast, he can pass, he's skilled. Oh my God, he was so hyped.
Yeah, Kenny undefeated because he said it about Joker too.
Oh man, he said it about man. He's like the best player on their team. Dude was coming off the bench. They was starting. What's the boy that played in Portland?
Nurt.
They was starting Nurt. They was he was like, man, it's a kid on their bench 10 times better than Nurt. He was like, he's gonna come in, and he had like 10 and 10 on us the first time we played him. He had a double off the bench. He was like, he's the best player on their team. And I was like, hell no. He was like, that. I'm telling you, Jeff, he's the best player on the team. And to see him being the MVP, Kenny, bro, you special, bro. He in the league.
Talking about this the guy he on the team.
Yeah, I swear.
crazy.
I swear to God, bro. He's like on the 10-day.
Nah, facts.
And he's special. His motor.
But shit, Kenny sound like Kenny need to do everybody in draft.
He do. Bro.
They just need to let Kenny pick for the team. I got
Bro,
it.
But here's the other thing. Here's the other part of the conversation I don't see talked about nearly enough. When you play this Princeton-style movement, offense, pass cut, post split, lifting the big so you have free cutting lanes, it's a great idea, and it's a great offense that carries you through the regular season. But traditionally, whenever we got to the postseason or the biggest games, you had to go away from that because of switching. The Cavaliers started switching all of those ball screens, rendering the post split actions neutral. You basically have to go to an isolation to take advantage of the switches. And when you have players who cannot do that because they're relying off of defensive miscommunications and catching off back doors, or two going with one and you're left wide open for the three, and you now have to create something traditionally either in an ISO, closed out, ball screen type of action, a lot of them were not able to do those in the biggest moments. And so they had to then go back to putting Stephen Curry on the ball because he was the only person who could consistently create an advantage on the ball. And so you weren't even playing the offense that Steve Kerr made his name for. This same phenomenon happened in 2022 to the Boston Celtics. It was the same exact thing. At first, it started off them playing this post-split action, but as you consistently switch these actions and stop getting anything, you just have to go back to the traditional style of play. And Steve Kerr's lack of ability to adapt, to me, and him being carried by Stephen Curry has really led to a lot of fortunate scenarios for him, in my opinion, to where people credit his offensive system when it's not even being used in the biggest moments. It will be like Mike D'Antoni. But Stephen Curry and those players, Kevin Durant and these type of guys, are just so good that they just win. Then, again, this was talked a little bit more about in the other video. Steve Kerr has been horrible with development. Horrible. Horrible with rotations and development. Even in the quest of going to the championship in 2022, we were benching Jonathan Kuminga for random reasons. Jordan Poole was up and down because of inconsistent minutes until he became really good. You know, he's going to have his inconsistent play as well just because of his style. I'm not trying to blame everything on Steve Kerr. But it wasn't like that was perfect. Sometimes people will say if you win, it kind of justifies everything you did. Sometimes teams win almost in spite of coaches at certain moments. I do think Steve Kerr's system helped them as a team for sure. But clearly, in certain moments, it wasn't his system. It was just people winning. And so then his development, again, in the other video, I talked about how he ruined James Wiseman. He ruined his value so badly, even though James Wiseman was a productive player. And I put the numbers he was averaging for Golden State on the screen. His value was ruined so bad that they had to get rid of him and traded him for GP2, an undrafted guy who plays defense, averaging 5 points. Again, I like GP2. I liked him at Oklahoma State. You know, he's my type of guy. I like off-ball point guards. But he's not James Wiseman. He wasn't worth James Wiseman. And if you did not ruin James Wiseman, you would have been able to get a lot more back for him than the player you just let go. That was undrafted. Did we forget about him benching Tatum in the Olympics? And people will use, again, the winning, we won the Olympics, to say, hey, well, clearly it was the right decision. Again, the results alone in sports do not justify what you do. That means you have to have it's value over replacement. How hard was it? What were the odds? If you do something that pretty much everyone could do, then we don't give you too many kudos for that. Every coach wins the gold medal for the United States, whether they play Tatum or not. If Tatum got hurt and they picked somebody else, you think they would have lost? Now, I do think this kind of cheapens the competition because we saw how much more competitive it actually was. But still, that's my point. Like, he could have won the gold playing Tatum, but because he wants to be so rigid in his system, the only way he saw fit to win is to not play the guy who just came off the championship, one of the best players in the NBA, one of the easiest type of players to fit in a system because he's a wing. Doesn't dominate the ball. He's not Paolo Banchero. He's a wing. He plays defense. But anyway, he couldn't figure out how to play Tatum either because he's talented. And so Kerr's refusal to adaptation even in the small ball. Again, I want guys to understand small ball only works not because guys were actually small, but because they were quick with certain types of skill sets which gave them an advantage. Nowadays, when you got tall guys with those same skill sets, that same level of quickness and athleticism, it does not benefit you to do that same thing and be smaller. It's not rocket science. But to Kerr, I don't know. He can't do that. He can't do that. He has to play the small ball. It took him forever. Like, Quinn Post plays well, and he takes him out the starting lineup for a long, long time. How does anyone develop a rhythm? Moses Moody could have been a really, really good swing guard in this NBA. He probably won't reach higher than role player status due to his time in Golden State. Now, again, it's not like boo-hoo. Moses Moody's still a productive player. I'm just saying. Look, man.
You got to give Jonathan Kuminga all the praise, man, in this moment. And for him to, like everybody's stating, man, for him to be ready, and I know in his heart, he probably wanted to tell Steve Kerr, but that probably would have led to a fine. Him not being ready to play, him telling him no, that probably would have led to a fine. So, yeah, for him to go out there and do it the way he did it, yeah, man, shout out to that young man. I just got a question for Steve Kerr. What's any different than, you talking about he came out aggressive, attacking the basket, what's any different than any other time he takes the floor? Same way he plays all the time. That he can't get in the rotation, no, that's wild.
He's still the same player. He still go out there, aggressive, ruthless. He looks like his shot is more pure. He look a lot more athletic. It's like he didn't have some time to really heal the parts of his body now that can make him look even more ultra athletic. He ain't got no injuries. And to see Steve Kerr make up shit, bro, after a month.
You expect him to play bad, that's what it was.
That's they set him up to fail.
Come out that motherfucker and be like, see, that's why we ain't playing him. Some shit like that.
Exactly what it was, bro. That's exactly what it was.
Man,
and he turned the tables on their ass. I'm proud of him. There ain't enough appreciation for players like him that's being put in them situations, like Khalil Ware, Cam Whitmore, Cam Thomas, all these type of guys that are being shitted on by coaches who don't have no accountability. There ain't no union to protecting these type of players. And if they come out to defend themselves, it's all hell gonna break loose. So if you need an advocate, I'm gonna get on their ass for sure.
It's going to be tough for Steve Kerr to change his philosophy on winning. Motherfucker got 4 championships.
Right.
Running it this way.
Right.
With Kevin Durant.
And I know he doesn't have the same personnel. He doesn't have the same personnel, but it's hard. I know the recipe to win because I've proven it. Why am I going to change this shit?
Because the personnel's not the same.
I know, but that's the most logical thing is to change what your what your team is. But most people don't do that. He's not going to do that.
That's the problem. As a coach, you got to be able to adjust. This ain't fucking college, bro. Like, this is the NBA. Teams adjust, and everyone has, to the point, a lot of people have figured out the Warriors.
Is it safe to say that without Steph, that whole motion offense or whatever you want to call it looks terrible?
Look at what's their record without Steph?
Because when their record was decent without Steph.
Decent.
When we saw them play without it, some of those possessions are really bad.
They're
with
nasty
grenades.
because they're because Steve Kerr has them so programmed to look for Steph. The motherfuckers don't forgot how to play basketball except who? Kuminga.
Yo, this is the man who didn't play Jason Tatum after a championship.
Y'all want to give him a good coach, man. He a nut.
Hey, told you, bro. Fucking Steve Kerr, man.
He fucked it up. He said, "Thank you, Golden State Warriors."
Fucking Steve Kerr.
Just
take your ass home.
Stop what you're doing. Look at this dunk here. Switch hands in the air.
Golly.
And laughing about it.
That's dope, man.
Yeah, man.
That was fire.
Go ahead, load it up, Lou, man. The last 3 games with the Hawks, man. He is fit in with this team. Hey, he told him right, boy. Jalen Johnson, you gonna love having a wing in your team like this.
Yeah.
So honestly, all in all, man, all I'm saying is I think a lot of times we attribute success to the wrong people. Same with failure, especially in the percentage of responsibility of success or failure. In Steve Kerr's case, I think he's been given a lot of credit for the success of the Golden State Warriors, but I don't believe his value to that success is nearly as big as the credit he's given, even though he's clearly very valuable. You know, like if you're 30% valuable to the credit, that's still a significant portion. That's almost a third. Or even 50%, but you're being talked about like, you know what I mean? You're more than that, then it's off. So I think some people, you know, whereas they're real visionaries like Kenny Atkinson's and Mark Jackson's who kind of transform something, which is much, much harder to do. Steve Kerr himself said how transforming something is much, much harder to do than kind of adding your own little tidbit on something. That's out of his mouth. It's almost like he described his exact situation to a T when talking about Kenny Atkinson getting the job in Cleveland and what he's done. You already have a good team, just add your own little flavor to it. You can take them over the top and get all the credit. To me, that's the story of Steve Kerr. You know, add your tidbit on it. You have something that's already going in the right direction. Now you receive all the credit. And Mark Jackson never got a job again. He has yet to get a job again. And I guarantee you, Steve Kerr, if he quit tomorrow, he would have an offer tomorrow. It's a cold game, but that's the video. I just kind of wanted to talk about Steve Kerr, man. Clearly, I'm not the biggest fan of Steve Kerr at all. Even though I respect and admire what he's done. You know, he's won on many different levels. You know, even though that was winning with Michael Jordan, being on a team with Michael Jordan, Tim Duncan, and coaching the Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and these guys, you still won. Hey, it is what it is. So that's the end of the video. That's my video about Steve Kerr. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe. This is Hoop Symmetry. Just trying to bring more balanced conversations to the game of basketball. And if you want more content like this, show the support in any of those aforementioned ways. And I'll check you guys later. This is Coach Muhammad.